All right, this is going to be my last post about learning programming. This week, I feel like I reached an escape velocity when it comes to my knowledge. It's interesting that there's a moment where you kind of realize that you're no longer learning something and now you're just kind of applying it. It's almost like the analogy that came to mind was like if you're learning a new spoken language, like you can now read a book or read like a page of text. And I think I've kind of reached like high school level novel literacy when it comes to programming. I'm definitely not an expert. I'm still definitely like novice, but I'd say I'm fluent. And the feature I built this week is what showed that to me and made me feel that. I'll show you what I did in just a second. But it made me also think about this, that rule of thumb, the 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. I think there's also like a kind of an adjacent one. Maybe it's like 1,000 hours to become fluent in something. I was at around 700 hours, but I imagine that doesn't sound as good as 1,000 hours. So rule of thumb, maybe 1,000 hours. But that's an interesting distinction because 10,000 hours is like a huge amount of effort. But to get to 1,000 hours is a lot less. And to learn something in 1,000 hours, that feels a lot more doable. Maybe a year of, somewhat dedicated work, and you can learn something to the point of fluency. So let me show you what I was working on, but this will be my last post about learning. I'll definitely still be posting about what I'm building, but no longer about the learning process. Maybe a few tips or things I learned along the way, but that's about it. Anyway, one sec. Okay, so the thing that I wanted to show you was that I've been working on is the push notifications. And the reason this feels like a big kind of like milestone in the project is because it's quite a complicated piece of functionality, both from like a user experience, like setting notifications, like letting people know when to let them know, what if they deny the notifications, and I'll walk you through some of that stuff and show you what I built. But also on the code side, like there's just a ton of there's a notifications manager, there's a delegate that you have to set, and a delegate is like a concept that was relatively new to me, but I figured it out through doing this. Obviously, you can see there's just like a million things here going on. And the biggest part, though, was that I did this, kind of figured it out myself. I watched a brief tutorial and it seemed to work, or a brief tutorial that kind of like taught me a little bit about notifications. But I wrote all the code myself, I structured it myself, and had a few friends just kind of look at it and check it. And for the most part, their feedback was just kind of like small little kind of adjustments. I didn't get anything wrong. That felt like a big deal. But let me just get into this here. So I'm creating, this is the new version, or there shouldn't be any notifications permissions set here. So you can imagine like somebody installing Revere. Yes, there's no Revere down here. Normally there would be if you already set notifications. So think of this as like a fresh install on this iPhone. So I have the app open here. I have the reminders section, and you'll notice that there's a little bell that shows that tells the person, hey, any of these reminders aren't going to show up as notifications. So you can click the bell and it pops up this little sheet. There's a little animation, which I was trying to do. But the thing I also want to show you before I do anything here is that I have this test page. This is not going to be part of the app. This is just to see what's happening behind the scenes. So I can create like a test notification, and that'll fire in 5 seconds. Actually, no, it won't fire because I haven't given permissions, which is kind of part of this whole flow. So the permissions piece is interesting. So let's say they click here, so you can allow notifications from here, but more realistically, that someone's going to create a new reminder. So let's call it smell the clogs. I'm going to save this, and then that pops up. So if I say, for example, not now, it just lets them know you won't be notified, and then they can go ahead and save that. But they haven't triggered the notifications alert from Apple, and that's important because once they do, you can't ask them again. So in the future, if I want to ask them for another feature, say some calendar related thing, I can't ask them because once they say no, you can't. That's why showing them this and intercepting that matters. So let's say, though, now I want to create a new one. I want to go back, or I want to allow it. I can click allow. That's the alert that you can only show once. And so now they show up, I show it once, I'm hoping they click allow, but let's say they don't, and they say don't allow. That sucks, because now if we look here, there's no notifications. If I create a test one, nothing shows up here. So if they create a reminder, that's not going to show up either. But if they click this little bell, now this different screen shows up. So that's a whole thing I had to figure out. And you can tap this button here, and that will take you to the settings page where you can turn on your notifications. So let's say I click allow now, I go back to Revere. You can see the bell disappeared. That was a whole thing I had to figure out. And now the notifications are all back. But that was an extra step, because the system doesn't do that automatically. It doesn't just schedule any of your past notes. It doesn't know anything about what your app is. So I had to go and create those notifications. So when you flip the notifications on and you switch back, and it checks all your reminders, says, okay, which ones are in the future? And it looks and says, okay, let me schedule those 6 notifications in the future. And so if we count, we have 4 to 6 notifications in the future, which is cool. So now the other thing I wanted to show you quickly is, so what is it? 339. Let's do 340. So let me save that. Let's bring up the clock. Yeah, so I'll just speed this up. Okay, so we should see this show up. Boom, shows up. That's cool. And I also implemented inline notifications, which is nice. So you can complete it, snooze it. Let's do a snooze. And also notice that it says reminder, feed the dogs. And the reason, so let's snooze that. So that was at 340. It should be snoozed. You should see one at 350 somewhere. Let me refresh. Oh, wait. I think the snoozes, oh yeah, the snoozes don't show up in this list. That was something I wasn't able to get sorted, but they do trigger, because I remember troubleshooting this yesterday. The other thing that's interesting, we have 15 seconds here. So let me set this for 341. And what's interesting here is that this one is for Gordon Freeman. So watch when this notification triggers in just a few seconds. This one, because there's a person associated with it, will have their name. So their reminder for Gordon Freeman. That was also, these are all just like little additional things. I was like, oh, I'd like to do that. And then I looked into how I might do that, and then I tried doing it, and it worked. So I'm feeling accomplished, that I can come up with a feature and then build it. So let's complete this one. Yeah, so that one completes. So all those inline actions do work, but the notifications here, this doesn't update with the snoozed ones. Anyway, that's reminders, a whole bunch of stuff that had to happen for that to work. And yeah, I feel like at this point, I'm able to go ahead and build any new functionality I want. It's definitely not going to be expert at any of this, but I have the skills I need to be able to read stuff, build stuff, try stuff. And then I have a support network of people to point me in the right direction if I go wrong. Anyway, that's it. I'll leave it there.